Gary Millat.
Here.
Victoria Newport. Here. Valerie Henry Hernandez. Here. Rick Smith. Howard Sullivan.
Here.
Everybody could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We start tonight with public participation and recognition. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and criticism of individuals is not in order. Lori, do we have any cards tonight?
Not having cards.
Thank you. Next, we have board committee reports and correspondence. Howard?
Very briefly, I had an opportunity to attend the forensics demonstration at the high school. It was phenomenal. Everybody involved was, my personal thanks to you. It was great.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I could say a couple of things about Safety Task Force, which met recently. Talked about a number of things, particularly communication. There will be at some point some student members joining that committee, is what I'm understanding. And as far as students go, also figuring into the communication aspect, there was some talk about how we communicate things. I don't want to go into in depth here, but how we transfer information, during say a fire drill or a threat of some sort or things like that. There are any number of ways that the communication can be moved between people that know and people that need to know. And so that group, STF, or Safety Task Force, is working on what we can do to improve that and what methods are best to use for that purpose. There were several other things along those lines, and I don't want to take up any more time, but it was a good meeting, and things are going to be discussed further.
Okay. Anybody else? Right. Next, we have the non-business consent agenda. That the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through G. Do we have a motion?
I move.
Second. Any discussion?
Yeah, explain to me the item F, if you would, please. Is there somebody here too?
Sure.
That would be Amy Crook, bilingual coordinator.
No, for F is for Project Search.
Oh, sorry.
Do you have a question about the conference?
Yep.
Okay,
Please.
sure. So Project Search, which is our new program that we are getting started at with our partnership with Kitchwaukee Hospital and with RAMP. They have an annual conference. The conference goes into depth about the roles of each partner and how to roll out the program and to support the program. And so we're looking to send 2 people, an administrator and the teacher.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How many kids do we have in this program?
There will be a total of 12 students enrolled. And, but that will be a combination of students from DeKalb as well as DeKalb County students that would be the right fit for this program.
So that you're looking for 12 total,
Yes,
not necessarily all of them will be DeKalb kids, obviously.
correct,
Right.
correct. So we'll be having that assessment part. They're now putting in their applications, and then we'll be doing an assessment piece, which is all about, there's interviews and skills, skill trials that they'll go through to see if they're the right fit for the program.
And the conference is to, just to network and to, it teaches you how to administrate the program or how to work with that program.
Correct, very, very much so. Yes, and it was very highly recommended for our team.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. Roll call, please.
Jeff Holgren,
Yes.
Terry Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez, Rick Smith, Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Okay, next, we have the business consent agenda. That the Board of Education approve the business consent agenda items A through D. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion? Okay. Roll call.
Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Terry Malat,
Yes.
Jeff Holgren,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
Okay, next we have business and finance. Request to purchase Chromebooks for Curriculum Technology Initiative and request for quote to lease one-to-one devices. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the purchase of 2,250 Chromebooks at a total cost of $911,000, $911,250, and allow administration to obtain requests for quotes to lease the devices over a period of 3 to 4 years. Do we have a motion?
So
Okay, discussion?
I received some external correspondence in relation to this purchase that was of a negative nature. Mostly involved with the cost and spending another $1 million and the need for a couple of things to come into place. One of them being the need to actually demonstrate to the public that approaches using computers in the classroom actually work. And secondly, to look for things that can be done, in particular, using the external power of the devices to reduce costs to the district otherwise. For instance, we've seen what snow days look like. And a snow day, we've got to keep the buildings functional. It means more cost to the district. If we can, and I believe it's a state law that's under quite under review now, if we can get a hold of a couple of those snow days to use those for some type of computer-based learning and distance learning, that we could recover some of this cost by making those snow days not cost the district as much anymore. So to me, that's a wash, and the benefits far outweigh the expenditures that for students to be able to use. Yes, and Jeff, you wanted to.
Well, I just want to jump in on what you just said. So when you're done, I don't need to jump in. I just want to contribute when you're done.
I'll just yield to you, Jeff.
Okay. Ben, you've made a point on the efficacy of the contract that we have. In other words, it seems like it was well negotiated. From a curriculum standpoint, Jenny, jumping in, I don't think I've ever seen, or I don't think it's been presented to the board, a dovetailing with the efficacy of. I mean, I know we've negotiated for these machines, but I don't know that I've ever, or do you have any thoughts that, obviously you're not prepared for it because I haven't asked you the question ahead of time, but I'd like to know, I don't think, I've been here for, coming on 2 years, but I don't think that I've ever been presented with, I've been presented with the mechanical side of these Chromebooks, but I never have been presented with the from a curriculum standpoint, or how we're moving with those things forward, how those things are growing in the program, et cetera, et cetera. I'd really be interested in knowing how these things, how we use these things, and how we see them being used as we move forward with investing another $985,000 into this, how we're going to be getting that back so that when people come up and say, hey, you know, how are those Chromebooks working in the schools? I might be able to have some answer instead of, hey, we have to do it just because we have to do it, right? I mean, I'd like to have that. Do you foresee something, is there data in that sense out there?
We have anecdotal data, and I think we've shared videos with you about students using the Chromebooks in the classroom, but if you want a more formal presentation, we can certainly do that.
I'd like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like that. I'd like to see some sort of manageable goal result kind of thing with the Chromebooks. There has to be some sort of studies out there on those things and how you see it going from one phase to the next, to the next, to the next, especially once you've had it. I mean, I understand how going from not having them to having them, you'd see results from that possibly. But I just would like to know how it grows within, you know, how it grows once you have them, how you see results and how they measure results. That would be worthy of some investment in time, to me anyway, if you could do that. And I don't know if anybody agrees with me.
Yeah, I got one other question. This is probably for Cindy. I remember when these first come out, you know, I wasn't really in support of them. Because I feel like, especially at the lower levels, I don't think you can get better learning than from a teacher than a computer, you know what I mean? But I remember the prior superintendent said, we're going to save a ton of money on paper. I don't know where that come from or how. Are we saving anything on paper?
We've probably saved a little, but I wouldn't say a ton. I mean, obviously not enough to pay for Chromebooks.
Yeah.
That's a lot of paper.
That's a lot
I
of paper.
mean, I think we've seen some decreases in the use of paper, but it hasn't, you know, been eliminated.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some, but not.
Yeah.
Just something people say.
Yeah. No,
It's always saving
That's
paper.
what I told them.
They said that when computers came in the first place. It's gonna
Yeah.
save so many trees.
But where it has reduced is textbook purchasing, correct?
Well, yeah, but we still have to buy digital licenses too,
Right.
so it's kind of, you know, somewhat of an offset, but at least when we're getting those. I know with some of the textbook adoptions, you have some hard copies that are available, but then there's also the digital part, but then the digital part is kind of updated. It's the most up-to-date version the minute you get on the computer. So when there is a change, you see that automatically, so.
Yeah.
That you're, you know, definitely just more up-to-date, you don't
Yeah.
have hard copies of textbooks laying around as well.
I'd be interested to see what we find.
Yeah, me too, especially if there's any savings there.
Yeah, and even on the paper savings, I know we were looking at the cost initially, that's not one of those savings that we
Yeah.
incorporated, because we knew it was very difficult to.
Yeah, paper
to
ain't
get
gonna
paper
save. I work in a school, teachers love to copy.
savings.
It's just so easy for us to keep doing something and not really investigate it. So I think it's worthy of investigation.
I agree, Jeff. I'm glad you brought it up. I also, Howard, got an outside email regarding this issue. And in part, what I remember of it is the expense. The person was unhappy about the expense. I'm not so unhappy about the expense, but I certainly agree with what Jeff just said. And I was one that wasn't fully on board with the notion of one-to-one in the first place. I had to be won over. I want it to work. I want to believe in it. But I'm skeptical on all things, and you have to prove things to me. And so for that reason, I agree with Jeff that I've been shown data, hard data, that says that would be a smart thing, consider it especially in the face of our tier 3 and 4 schools and performance problems right now. I want to know that this one-to-one thing is working before I spend another almost $1 million on it. And if the data is there and it proves it, then great, let's do it, because I'm not worried like the email person about spending almost $1 million on this. If it makes sense and it works, and it improves education, gives people better chances to improve themselves and have a better education, that's great. I think it's a good bargain, even at $1 million. But we don't know. I don't know anyway. I don't feel like I know right now that I can say for certain that spending almost $1 million on more Chromebooks would necessarily move our situation forward and improve our tier 3 into a tier 2 or something, you know, some measurable change. And so I'd really like to get information from our data that I'm sure is compilable and see if we can prove that in fact it's a wise investment at this point in time. And I don't think, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, people, Ben and Cindy and Jenny, can we wait on this? Can it wait for a couple of weeks or however long it takes to compile the information that would convince me that it's a wise expenditure?
Well, to be honest, the reason why this is being brought forth to you sooner than it has in years past is because there is a processor shortage and because we are starting to reach tariffs that are going to be implemented. So the longer we wait, then we're going to actually see a 20%, potentially a 20% cost tacked on to that dollar value.
Yeah.
So we can wait, but we all are then gambling with time.
I know you're working with information that's been given to you about pricing and shortages and so on. And I trust you for, applying what information you have as best as you can. I personally don't believe it's necessarily going to be the way that has been told. And I don't think anyone can really say whether it will or won't. And what I can't understand as a board member is that, so we might have a penalty to pay. If we wait for a couple of weeks or a month, we might possibly, have a 10, 20% penalty to pay. I'm willing to take that risk rather than take the risk that we spend almost $1 million and not get much back for it.
So are we having a discussion here whether or not to go forward with Chromebooks?
I think the discussion would be that, we need more information before we can decide whether or not.
So if we decide, I'm just going to throw a hypothetical out. Let's say the data doesn't come back as supportive as the board wants it to be in 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Not going forward with Chromebooks. Does that mean that we need to start tearing down all of this platform that's been put in place? We're not going to have Chromebooks?
I would have brought it up. Let me explain what my thoughts are. My thoughts are, it was not a if this, then that. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't approve this particular. I just feel at the time that we bring this issue up is when I brought up that issue. In other words, the money for this amount of the Chromebooks, I'm not saying I would keep 6 Chromebooks. I'm just saying I'd like to know how it's working, how the Chromebook thing is working. And it was just the platform. This discussion began with the discussion of spending $985,000, right? So I'd say us going along without knowing no data on this, or I haven't. Somebody else may have seen some data on this, but I haven't. I just feel that it's an appropriate time to bring up the subject when we're dropping this kind of, right? And I appreciate Ben's.
I'm not questioning your request.
Yeah.
It's just dismantling and tearing
I'm
down.
not suggesting that. I'm just saying this is an opportune time to have that discussion when we're putting that kind of money down, right? And I appreciate the.
Whether we've developed the data locally or whether it's out there in other communities and other districts, which is where I have looked and found it. What I found about this is that for repetitive tasks, there's hardly anything that beats a Chromebook or a computer with a math program linked to it. For instance, the ability to repeat and repeat and repeat until somebody gets something right without criticism and without seeing a bunch of zeros on the paper. That has been the way with check marks and all the red X's and all, that's all gone. There's no more red X's. You just keep trying until you get the basic concepts. That has worked. It's worked in the area of math. And I have no problem saying, let's get these Chromebooks at the lowest price before the tariffs go up, because they probably will, whether they really do or not. To me, I'm saying I would as soon go for it now.
To ask for what Jeff asked for. It's not saying it's a bad thing. He wants to be informed, but to completely say that we're not going to vote on it tonight, I think we would have to be in agreement that that's what we want to do. And I haven't yet had that conversation. So.
Well, I agree with what Howard just said about it's great for repetitive kinds of things. It's also great for people who excel greatly, like Khan Academy, for instance, being able to go to those A lot of universities now have programs, ESCON Academy is another program, you know, where you can have a computer, Chromebook or whatever, and a student of many different ages can just learn so much. It's incredible. But I want to know, our subgroups are the ones that are having so much difficulty. Are they receiving benefit from these computers, from these Chromebooks, and the way we apply them? I want to know that before I spend $1 million.
Can I make a recommendation that you forward questions that you would like to see answered in a presentation? Specific questions that each of you would like to see answered, and we can embed that into a future presentation. Again, if the board's going to choose to delay the vote, that's your vote. We may end up paying more. That's your guys' call.
Okay, so based on that, what does the board want to do? Do we want to delay the vote, or do we want to take a vote tonight? So I'm only hearing from Ballard.
I'm in favor of the vote tonight. I'd like to delay the vote. I want to know what I'm voting on.
Take the vote.
Yeah.
Take the vote.
All right, roll call, please.
Fred Davis,
Yes.
Jeff Hallgren,
Yes.
Harry Malat,
No.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Val Pena, Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have request to bid paper, office and miscellaneous supplies. This is an informational item. Cindy?
Every year, we're just talking about paper, paper and office and miscellaneous supplies. So we're just coming as informational today to the next board meeting, we come back for action on that, and then we start the process to start that bid.
Questions for Cindy? All right, do we have a consensus to run this back as an action item at the next board meeting?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
And next, we have new business and administration, work plans for school improvement for Tier 3 and Tier 4 designated schools. This is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the work plan for school improvement for Gwendolyn Brooks Elementary, Founders Elementary, Little John Elementary, Malta Elementary, Tyler Elementary, Clinton Rosette Middle School, and Huntley Middle School. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
I'd like to see a presentation. I'd like to have somebody speak about this. Please, Jenny, or whomever you designate. I'd like to
We had presented last month on this.
Right.
Yeah.
Reaffirm, if you would, please, what this is.
So, when the ESSA designations came out, preliminary designations came out this summer, and then final designations came out at the end of October. And we ended up with 7 buildings having either a Tier 3 or a Tier 4 designation. So under ESSA, if that is indeed the case, then there are a couple of things you need to do in order to access federal funds. And one of those is to go through and complete the rubric, the Illinois Quality Framework. And the second, and then you use that data from that's a needs assessment to write the work plan for school improvement. And that's what these 7 buildings have done.
I'm ready back. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jenny, are the forms as filled out available to us as board members, or we should look at them?
They should be accessible to you. They were the links that were there for the work plans. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, roll call, please.
Karen Malat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Jenny.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Howard Sullivan,
Yes.
Jeff Hallgren,
Yes.
Fred Davis,
Yes.
Okay, next, we have recommended revisions to board policy 2:110. This is an information item. The board will hold a first reading of recommended revisions to board policy 2:110.
Howard, you,
This was my
your
recommendation.
recommendation, so
Yes.
if you don't mind giving the background.
Okay. The section 2 110 consists of 9 points that mention specific duties of the board president. One of those duties is to make all board committee appointments unless specifically stated otherwise. That's number 2 in the list. And you do that as board president, and I expect you may do it again. I don't know. We have an election coming up, and exists the possibility that within 2 months of now, well, 2.5 months of now, that there may be a different president. And meanwhile, we are engaged in negotiations, labor negotiations with DCTA, which means the possibility exists that somebody could be sitting in the president's chair, in effect overturning the appointments that you've made. Or that somebody with absolutely no experience being on the board could now become the president of the board and go take care of things that are there. So there's a lot of question marks about whether the board is actually represented by an appointment to go and sit in the most expensive negotiation and the most costly to have. So I suggested that we change this, because of the way it's written. Number 2 is to make all board committees unless specifically stated otherwise. And what I wanted to do was add one of the specific statements otherwise. And that is when we have a negotiation that, well, here's how it would read instead. Make all board committee appointments unless specifically stated otherwise. A specific appointment exception is that for any board member appointed to engage in any contract negotiations with a union currently representing employees of the district, approval of the full board. That means the board as a group would have to vote on it, so that you know at least it's coming from the board rather than from one person who has appointed him or herself, or even appointed friends, or who they felt qualified. Because the board changes, and it may change over the time frame of the negotiations. So I requested this, and because this is a first presentation, I'd just like to say, let's think about it and meet again on it in 2 weeks, because this is what we do with the first reading.
Well,
And I'm willing to answer questions.
okay, any questions for Howard?
No, I have a thought. So if anybody has a question for me.
You're not allowed thoughts.
I would like to respond to what you just said. I think that that's something that should be taken up when we do a workshop. I think that we should look into those particular kinds of restructuring of the way that the board does its work. So I think that that's not something that we would do in 2 weeks. I would think that would be something that we would do as a new board after the new board is seated. I would think that we would go over that particular part of the bylaws and review those. That would be my thought.
Well, Jeff, one of the reasons that I brought this up is that I am not going to be on the new board. And I wanted to see this kind of change happen while I'm here. So your thoughts is taken into consideration, but
Go ahead, Gary.
while I'm here.
Howard, you had 4 years.
Yeah, I know.
I forgot.
I had 4 years. I had 4 years, didn't feel like I was effective enough and needed to do one last thing.
I feel kind of the opposite. I don't want to do anything in my lame duck session here. You know, I don't want to do anything that's going to have a potential major impact. And District 428, if I'm not going to be here after April into May to take the flak or to discuss it further. I don't want to do that. That's not how and you can do it any way you like. That's fine.
Thank you.
But that's how I would do it. Okay, but here's the real thing, or one of the things that I thought about when I reviewed this. I like transparency. I like that aspect of it. But I also have to say, we have a chance to elect the president of the board. And when we do that, we choose someone that we think is going to make appointments appropriately among the people that he or she has to work with. They choose, and those people are supposed to be the best ones. We also have in negotiations, any kind of a union contract negotiation, we have an attorney that's our mouthpiece, that speaks for the board. So I get a little concerned about changing major policy. I agree with you, Jeff, that, I'm not against considering these things, but I do think, like you said, that it ought to be done in a workshop setting, not, we have a consensus tonight, go out in 2 weeks. I think it's a bigger deal than that to me. I would just question, anytime you change, it's like putting an amendment on the Constitution, it's not that serious, but anytime we do something serious that has the potential to change future boards, I would like for that to have many inputs, not just a couple of lame duck people, or more than a couple, but I think it's a bigger deal, and I'd like us to take the time to look at it. And
Gary, in the 4 years you and I have been on this board, we have had one external workshop. And that is just too darn long a time frame to wait.
I agree. Well, I agree it's too long to wait for workshop. I don't agree that the suggestion.
Well, and I have my own thoughts about this. I am on board with Howard. I completely agree. It's not that we don't trust Victoria or we don't trust future board presidents per se. It's that we work as a board, right? And we function as one. So why not have that level of transparency where we're all discussing, especially when we're going into negotiations and one board member, let's just say per se, me, I would never want to sit on the board on negotiation for teachers. I'm an educator myself, therefore would probably be biased. So I would recuse myself, right? But not everyone holds the same ethical standards that I hold. So therefore, why not operate as a board? Why not function as a board and decide that together, especially since we want transparency? And it's not to bash the previous board, it's not to bash the current board. It's to say that negotiations took a toll last time that shouldn't have taken the toll it did, and it created a really negative tone in our community. So why not work and operate as a whole like we have been told to do, right? So decide together. I don't see a problem. At the end, it's still going to respect the board president. The board president might say, you know what, Carrie, we would really like for you to be the one to lead those negotiations. Well, hey, we are going to discuss it as a board. We're going to go in there knowing that you're the best qualified to have those discussions with teachers, right? And with all the people that come to that table.
Well, there's open meeting exceptions, and gives us an example. And the reason there are is because some people might not want to say things. So if we did it this way, and everything was in public, and I had a reason why I wanted to decline. In fact, this has happened at the national level recently, right? President Trump put forward a person for an office, and that person declined. Well, what if somebody wants to decline but doesn't want to state their reasons, right? That's why the Open Meetings Act has exceptions, so that when you get to certain kinds of things, it is done in closed session. It's not done in open session. So I can imagine, and then again, back to what Jeff said, I'd like to see us talk about this stuff, but not just, now and 2 weeks ago. I'd like to have a longer time to consider things. So I think that there are occasions, or could be occasions, where certain people might want to say, well, I feel a certain way, but I don't want to put it out in the public hearing. I'd like to just tell the board president, decline, to the board president, rather than, put it in the atmosphere. I think that's one other angle that I can think of now, based on what you said. And I think there might be other angles I'd like to think on that apply to this. I'm not comfortable with doing it in just 2 weeks. It's a big deal. Anytime you change board policy, it's a fairly big deal.
So do we have a consensus to bring this back as an action item?
Not to me.
That's me.
Well, before you talk about the consensus, if we bring it back as an action item and it's voted down, you can always bring it around again when you have the discussion among the board that's elected.
I don't need it to be brought as an action. That's what I'm saying.
I don't say no to the consensus.
And no.
Well, I didn't know this win, so there is no point in asking me. I should recuse myself anyway.
All right, with that, the meeting will be adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.